Good evening, everyone. So I'm really working on these live settings. Okay. So for this live, I am going to be sharing my final takeaway and reviews about the Polygamist Netflix series. All right. So of course, over here we don't really dabble too much, into worldly things unless it is relevant, right, to what we do over here. And obviously you all know that it is part of my life purpose to educate on the different forms of non-monogamous relationship structures, polyamory, polygamy. And so I'm going to give my final reviews of this Netflix series, which I am aware that this is based on a book, right? And someone mentioned this to me in some of my comments today that, the author wanted to show, I guess, one, they brought up the pain of a woman going through this, and then the other one is showing the narcissistic tendencies of both men and women, and that these are fictional characters, X, Y, and Z. And the reality is, I'm breaking down how this film represents inherited dysfunctional family patterns that are passed down generationally and represented in the real world, right? So on this live, I'll share a little bit more, even just breaking generational curses in my personal family, right? I was born into a dysfunctional poly situation, right? So, the final thoughts I was having about this is it really brought me back centered to some of the things that I learned in my initiations into indigenous culture and way of life. And one of the main things that stuck out to me, and I am going to try to stay as balanced and myotic as I can in this final review, because there's a lot to be said, right? Like about it, right? It there's a lot of talking points, right? We could talk about, okay, the man is the leader, right? He's supposed to be the leader, and he had shortcomings, right? He has shortcomings, but that does not negate that the women were also doubt, like also having issues with their lower nature as well, right? They were not victims. I wanted to kind of talk about this from a perspective of, you know, first, it's very easy to like view things in this world with like feminism, where you blame the man and then the women is the victim, right? I mean, that's just such an easy cop out. We know it's so much deeper than that, right? Now the reality is, you know, there between the women, I wanted to talk about that because as a woman myself, right, there's a difference between a female and a divine feminine woman. There is a difference. And we talk a lot about this in our initiations with the Maji community. Because at the end of the day, it really is, it comes down to that. Like, the women were operating in their lower nature, right? They were possessive, they were insecure, they were vindictive, and they both wanted something for themselves, right? I mean, rather people want to look at it like, the first wife, she was just wanting her family together, okay? She had faults as well. She was not a victim. And then it's like the sociology behind people wanting to find who's the good human, who's the bad human. And I just don't really look at this series like that. I don't look at anything in life like that. I'm really looking at overall that all of them were operating in their lower nature. And so that brings me to my final thoughts on this series, right? So it's called The Polygamist, right? It's called that. And then the message that they're putting out is showing human beings that is of African descent operating in lower human nature. And that is on purpose. That is purposeful, right? Why don't we have, the Supermans out there and, the balance, right? You're not going to show that. So they're showing the lower nature. And so why? Because this is a breakdown in family and even in human design. When you're operating from your lower nature, which is competitiveness, selfishness, vindictiveness, revenge, when you're operating in your lower nature, that is not operating, that's operating below human standards. So really it's savagery, really, when you really get down to it, right? Because there's nothing useful coming out of it. You're not creating something out of that, but just continuing cycles. Like you're just continuing a loop, and that is apparent in the series. I just wanted to really talk about how they'll put these type of films out and the series out just so that it gets in a woman's subconscious too, especially Black women and women of African descent or indigenous descent, right? Of not trusting your sister, um, you know, fighting over a man, right? Never, right? I mean, I'd rather die, seriously. Because if I know that I am God, that means that the creator that exists in me, right? I am able to experience that every day. So when we look at this, it's not all of these terms that people using today, like narcissism between men and women. No, human beings have a choice. You're either operating in your lower human nature, competition, hatred, anger, right? There's levels, right? There's levels. There's always levels to everything. But when you're operating in your lower nature, you're in your lower nature. So it's either you're in your lower nature or you are in your higher nature, which is your connection to God or source or the creator of the universe. You're either in pleasure or you are in pain. And what they are showing is just to continue to fuel pain. So when you look at the series, it's just fueling all of their pain together. That's how they're coming together and developing relationships, right? So a higher ascended woman, she wouldn't be in anything like that. She wouldn't be in anything like that because it doesn't. If she was actually a woman, and then we have to look at the danger of the propaganda of showing females like this, because I kind of talked about this. Now again, I understand, yes, the man is supposed to be the head, the leadership, right? He's supposed to be guiding them, right? I get that. And he obviously completely failed, right? But 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 the women also have leadership roles in family and community. They do, right? So they were choosing to opt into this dysfunction together. That's just point blank, period. And the reality is that they showed this film so that they could continue to show the Amazonian type of woman, right? Women who just perpetually, right, like first attract someone like that, like attract a man like that. That's just, I mean, he's just not conscious or aware of what he's doing, you know. And when I say that, I mean like it's just careless. I'm not saying that, I guess awareness, there's balance with that, right? Because he knows what he's doing, but there's not awareness of, do you understand the role in the leadership that you're supposed to really be playing with your family when you're operating in multiple relationships like that? So again, it's showing the lower nature. But I want to just talk about the women only because, again, the reason why I want to talk about this is because as a divine feminine woman myself, right? I would say, like, I know the power that comes with true family and community skills, right? So it's like looking at this like, okay, they're showing images of females that are not natural or organic. A feminine, natural, organic woman would never participate in something like that. She wouldn't. That's not how she would not participate in something like that. You would leave. I'd rather die. And then also it's like, okay, so it's showing like an artificial right then, because if, okay, maybe, it's pulling on the insecurities, the revenge, again, the lower nature, right? The lower nature. So, that's kind of some of the stuff that I was kind of looking at, and that's kind of dangerous because I was looking at this from a perspective of, I asked this question recently. And I said, asking men, have you ever experienced the difference between a female and a woman? Like a feminine woman, naturally organic, meaning in her spirit. She's naturally a woman. There is a difference. There's a difference. And so I was asking that, and a lot of men said yes. So that's good. Some said, they got to think about it, need to think a little deeper about that because it's real. So there is a difference between an artificial woman, right? A programmer, right? And a divine feminine, like a woman, like she's naturally a woman. And what really separates the difference today in this day and time? Initiations. I mean, you're not just going to pick a woman that has been indoctrinated in worldly things and think she's just going to come in and just poof, she's a natural woman. No. We got to look at history. You got to do your history on feminism. You have to do your history on since World War II, the decline of femininity. This is real. You wouldn't even know what I'm talking about, right? If you haven't done your studies. This is all of the stuff that I had to learn on my initiations into, restoring my femininity and becoming authentically who I am. And you'll realize, quite frankly, oh, this world femininity has been gone for some time, for some generations. Feminism is an opposition to femininity. And if you don't believe me, do your study. You have to study. You have to study. So, me and my husband kind of talk about that because Joyce, which is the first wife, her daughter that she has with Joe, which is the main character man, the husband in this series, their daughter exhibits feminist type of ideologies and thought processes. But me and my husband talked about it together. And it's because she's experiencing this as a child. And she's looking at grown people dynamic and stuff, which they're not exhibiting this to her properly, right? And she's viewing it from a child, right? Like a child perspective, right? Like, and from a child perspective, it's going to be more emotions, right? And so, she's looking at it like, what's wrong with you, mom? Like, and the son even said that, this is kind of toxic, So yeah, so I think ultimately, the push in this society is that you want to get human beings to act below human standards in their lower human nature, because that will inevitably prevent sovereign community. You're not, that's literally what it is. But the moment you have human beings who are operating fully in their nature, organic naturally as a man, organic naturally as a woman, and they are consciously building relationships, they will then start to create. And that is what human beings were actually designed to do. So that is like the ultimate takeaway from the film, is like, oh, they want to continue to show me something that is okay. Could you take some things from that? That could be helpful? Maybe, maybe, okay, that's not for me to say. But ultimately, I would caution, just be aware, especially for women. I think this is the biggest thing, especially for women, that this is the lower nature, right? This is the lower nature of man, right? You never want anyone to put you in that type of frequency. You don't do that ever, right? You don't do that ever. And that comes with doing the inner work, right? Doing the inner work. But, ultimately it does reveal some things when we talk about poly relationships, because it is like seeing multiple mirrors, right? But, with that, you don't want to continue those cycles, right? That toxic and dysfunctional cycles, right? The point is to learn a lesson, right? And so this is all the things that I break down in the Poly Shadow workbook, because the absence of what's going on when you see this breakdown and these dysfunctional patterns that the film represents, it really comes down to a lack of training, education, and initiations, right? So this is why initiations was so important to indigenous people, right? You're not going to get worldly indoctrination and think that you can create or do something harmonious, together, like an advanced family structure like polygamy and polyamory, right? And some people still don't even understand, don't understand the structure. Like, some people have lived their whole lifetime in their 50s and 60s, and they think that they understand polygamy and polyamory, but they still don't. They still don't. And it shows, it'll show up in your children. That's a huge indicator. So in the Poly Shadow workbook, I do go over all the things that you can prevent, like on a karmic level. Like, just start on the basis. And I'm not saying that, yes, some things, you have to experience. Okay. But, a lot of things is just unnecessary. And then we have to realize that we are on a time clock. So spiritually, you want to get the information at this time, right? So this is what the Poly Shadow workbook is about. I really break it down and give you the tools so that you can begin to consciously create your relationships that build towards community. This series was so anti-community. I mean, everyone was in it for their own individual interests, you know? And if somebody was there, they were all participating in this. Someone could look at this and say, oh, well, they want to keep their family intact and things like that, X, Y, and Z. Okay, and maybe that's what they did. That's obviously what they were doing, but who's to blame then? You know? You're not going to just blame just the mistress. They all were participating in this. So, and then also me and my husband was having a like debrief about this. And so, it was helpful. Some of the women that were talking to Joyce, the first wife, her mother was explaining to her, like, as you know, the first mistress was developing or starting her relationship with Joe. Um, her name is Essie, I think. And she so let's see, Joyce was talking to her mother, and she was just kind of, describing to her, like, well, kind of like, look at you, you're not keeping yourself together, you know. I can see why, your husband's probably losing interest, and he's looking at like this hot woman that's kind of working with him at his job, who's a little younger, like women that were kind of talking to her, sometimes it could be a little helpful. So my husband, me and him was talking about it. And it's good to have women around who can kind of talk to you and hold you accountable and maybe help you see other perspectives, right? So I'm not on the feminist tip where it's just like, like always coddling women. That's not helpful. Like, come on, we have to be accountable, so she was just helping her see, different perspectives. But her mother was also saying some other things later on too in the series. Like, like, okay, you need to maybe start thinking about what you're gonna do, even on the financial level. You see what I'm saying? Like looking out for yourself. You know what I'm saying? So she was, she it was good that she had people around that was like sharing different perspectives with her, different women. It's good to have different perspectives. It was another woman in the community, and she was like talking to her, asking her, how is she able to allow her husband to just be with multiple women? So they kind of had that talk, you know, so anyway, I guess like in the whole film, you're looking at everyone try to figure it out, and I am gonna have to make a disclaimer. I looked at the overall plot of it, but no, I have not sat down and watched every single episode. I have not. Okay. So, it could be like small nuanced things and details that I may be, not sharing the depth of. But I have a lot of work to do, and we need to keep our attention on the main thing, which is in reality, right? Because the time is here and it's time for us to get serious about community. So I'm actually doing that tomorrow, right? With real humans in real time. We're not our mind occupied in, fiction. We're doing this in real life. So tomorrow we'll have the Maji Community, our exclusive community where we'll have an online event, and I'm going to be sharing our philosophy and new approach to polyamory and ethical non-monogamous relationships. We do center our spiritual system working through the opposite sex. So we focus on heterosexual polyamory. So that is a difference, because there is, other spaces and communities that is more fluid, type of relationship styles under the umbrella of polyamory and non-monogamy. Okay, so I just want to make sure I am forthcoming, and so that people know that that is what our spiritual life system is founded, like the foundation for it. Okay, so if that resonates, this is a free call that you can sign up for. This is going to be in our school community, and that's the Maji Community Mystery School. And you can click the link in the description. And then yeah, I think overall, those are some of my main points that I kind of wanted to get out. Is just, overall, um, the Polygamist Netflix film represented the lower nature of man and woman. And when human beings are operating in their lower nature, you will see perpetual conflict and repeated dysfunctional cycles in families. And that's not fun. That's actually very boring. And it's just fueling pain, right? Pain and lessons. So, what we want to do is we want to shift our consciousness so that we're able to overcome the shadow, the ego work, so that we can begin to consciously co-create our relationships that are actually building sustainable community and legacy for generations, right? So that each generation is creating and continuing that instead of generations just continuing to try to learn the lesson. You're just it's like a circle, like you're just like completely circling the loop until you develop Christ consciousness, and then you ascend and you get out of the reincarnation loop and start creating. Okay, so I speak from personal experiences. This was kind of very sensitive and hard for me because I really, really, really dislike them showing films or any pages right on social media that displays polygamy and polyamory from a lustful, egotistical, and degenerate image. I personally, and in poverty, in like limitation and scarcity, right? I don't resonate with that at all. I believe that this family structure is meant for humans to thrive, right? And ultimately, and build generational wealth, right? That's what sovereignty means to me. But generational wealth does not look like a mortgage, sorry, a a mortgage or a BMW car note. That's not what generational wealth looks like to me. Okay, so for me, when I was looking at like the film, it's really hard for me to watch women of African descent, and really women in general. It's just really hard for me to watch Black women fight against each other. Um, I focus more on that because that gets pushed more than like other things, right? Because they'll show, Black women in good relationship with white women, you know, more than they will Black women staying at odds and fighting each other. So obviously, that really does something to me. Being personally, I'm from Detroit, so seeing women fight, like physically fight, it does something to me. It does something to me because I don't know. I can't describe it. I've been like this since I was really young. Um, it's something with my femininity. It's like when I see it, it's almost like it's like if I was like in the wild, and then you see it, and then you're just like, mm, you know, that's what it feels like. That's my soul and my spirit. The divine feminine essence of who I am. To see that is so cringy. And then there was another sister who does polygynous content. When she talks about more of like, I guess she calls like matriarchal principles for women to learn, you know, that, these skills together, because she says some really good things, because really women are what makes that work, right? Polygamy, polyamory is, both sides, but polygamy, if you're going to be talking about sharing a husband, women cooperation and harmony and unity is what makes it work, right? So anyway, so she does some content on it, and then we were talking about it, and um she was just like, she just really despised seeing polygyny being represented and like shown, like how they showed on that film, you know. She was like, I couldn't get past the first episode, and I completely agree with her. I feel the same way. Like that's how cringy. That's how cringy it feels. Like obviously, in the first couple episodes, they're fighting, and it's just like that's just very toxic. That's just toxic, And I speak personally, being from Detroit, it hits home for me, right? Just dysfunctional patterns. And then even when I was growing up in Detroit and like in school and seeing girls fight, it's usually common that there's a boy in the middle of that, right? And so you just look at that and you're just like, it just feels so like, it feels traumatizing to look at, because as a feminine woman, femininity is really grace, right? Femininity is so high, it's angelic. So to see something like that, just feel like you are in the wild. And I'm just like, and the reason why is because I go back to nature, right? So in nature, when a female species have to act in violence, it's usually she's going for the kill, and it's usually to protect like her cubs, and it's more vicious than the male when you look at that in nature. And why? It's because it's out of the nature of femininity. But when she have to act in aggression, she's going for the kill, right? So when you apply that to human beings and you see females act like that, it's just like, this is the wild. It's just like, why am I why am I here? I need to beam back up my spaceship. So it's just like, because I'm like, I exist in heaven and flowers and butterflies and women loving on each other and being sisters with a man that they love. you know so the man is there, they love the man, and they can love each other, they can love their sisters, love their children, and the love is fueling the community and togetherness. That's a different existence. So imagine, I feel like, I come from something like that. And so you seeing, women fight, and you're just like, this is the wild. you know, what the So anyway, and it's not a fantasy, I've spoken to, women about this before. It's just like, oh, that sounds like a fantasy or whatever. No, you just have low self-esteem. I know what I'm worth, right? I know what I'm worthy of. I know what I deserve, right? I am the creator of my reality. And I'm not violating laws. I'm co-creating reality with the most high, right? I'm understanding, I'm working through the divine masculine, right? Respecting my husband, loving my role as a wife in community, right? So no, it's not a fantasy to exist in a reality in which everyone loves each other. It's like, yo, to think like that, it's like you got so much healing to do. You really do. And I've heard a sister say that to me before, and it's just like, that's all I could think in my mind. Like, you can't, the fact that you can't even fathom a family like that, you got so much work to do. You got so much work to do. So, but that's what this is about. It's about, us doing the work. So yeah, so I guess ultimately when I broke down um just the women relationships and the dynamics I felt was the most hurtful to me in regards to representation. I think it's because I started my journey. Sorry. Well, really, it started when I was really young. So when I was really, really, really young, it just always bothered me seeing Black women fight. When I was really young, and it's something that's like ingrained in me. I I can't really put my finger on it. So, you know, no, yeah, like being young, I just never, you know. So I ultimately think about my journey leading me to, okay, wanting for my sisters what I want for myself, right? But even, I want for my sister what's in her greatest and highest good of the best version of herself, right? And, you know, I've come across, guys that were very surprised on a community level. They were like, I've never seen a woman embody it as much as you, right? And because I actually mean what I say, you know, my poly journey started there with sisterhood. And that I always will uh, believe that's at the heart of, community togetherness, right? So have I, had people, you know, like we've all been snaked before, betrayed, or some type of, but people are gonna get their karma. You don't have to get back at people. Like the Most High takes it. Like, come on now, karma is real. I love, I love that song, "Karma" by Taylor Swift, because it's so real. But I get it. I've been there too. Like I know what it feels like to be so emotional about wanting to get back at someone, you want revenge and stuff, but that never leads well. That's just you allowing someone to pull your energy down. And that was evident in the film, right? So to be operating in your higher nature as a human, you always rise above. Who didn't Michelle Obama say that? She said that when they go low, we go high. Didn't she say that? Shout out to Michelle Obama, y'all. That's my mama. I actually met her before. Funny story. My college bound event, I met Michelle Obama when I was 18 years old. And we were at Wayne University in Detroit. And that was right before I went off, to college. And she was there, and I got to shake her hand. And she told me, and probably everyone, this message that she was going around shaking her hands, to never give up on my dreams. Or maybe she didn't tell everyone that, but it felt like it. But she shook my hand and said that, and I was like, oh, okay. And she was just like the most beautiful woman I have seen in my life. Like, I was like, I always tell this story, like, however beautiful you think Michelle Obama looks on like these devices and like film, she looks 10 times more beautiful in person. And that's ain't that hard to believe because she's so beautiful. Yeah, like she's very beautiful. And gracious. Right? There you go. So, showing that divine femininity, right? And so those are the type of you know, and when I say divine femininity, I just mean I probably shouldn't say that because I don't know how she would identify. I just think, she holds herself well, I guess, in a political realm, way, but you know, anywho, I don't want to get all into that because I know that's still worldly stuff too, right? Because I know people probably got stuff to say on the political level and things with her, Michelle, with Barack Obama or whatever. I'm not getting all into that. I'm merely just talking about complete, like, just like how she looks. That's it. I'm not talking about, nothing about their time, in office or things that they've been involved in. But yeah, so anyway, I would just say that she has a good representation, you know what I'm saying? Like of a black woman, you know. Um, but I guess on a more spiritual level, um, on a more spiritual level, that's different. I understand. So, I think for myself, I try my best, right? I think that my mother is also a good example of a divine feminine woman, right? My mother, and me and my husband was talking about that, yeah. I'm trying to think if I want to actually share it, but a story. I think, even as a child, it was a part of me that was looking in the film that made me think about a moment that I had when I was growing up. And my mother having a conversation with me about it. And she was just like, your father is a good man. And even mistakes that he make, if I'm able to get past it, then you should be able to get past it too. And so my mother has always been very family oriented. That's one of the best things I've learned from my mom. She always works really hard to, you know, look nice for my father, take care of the family. She has birthed 8 children. So yeah, so my mom is a good example of someone who always put her children first. And I've seen my mother in 10 times fold in situations where she's put to the test and she always put her children first, regardless of what comes out on the other side, right? So, and my mama would say that, growing up, my mama would say like, mama bear protecting the cubs type of deal. So, I come from, a mother like that. So, yeah. So yeah, I just wish like, in the film they showed more of like, focus on the children too. But like I said, it was just, it was showing a lot of dysfunction. And when we bring this type of stuff up, people always like to talk about how it's, not real, whatever, X, Y, and Z. But it's like, we could look at this film and, you know, all of us can probably think about some type of dysfunctional inherited family pattern that exists in our bloodline, you know? And the reality is that that's what I'm choosing to take from this film, um that we need to heal from, right? And it starts with learning how to develop conscious relationships, getting the tools to inner healing, shadow work, ego work, that deep work, so that you can break those cycles. And these are real things, right? These are not just words. The shadow is a real thing, the ego is a real thing. Come to our live event tomorrow on the Maji Community exclusive community call. This is going to be tomorrow, Wednesday, June 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the link will be in the description where you can sign up. And, and then also the Poly Shadow Workbook is available on my website, ashasekhmet.com/store. So I would highly recommend reading that so that we can stop repeating the loops, heal, and so that we can actually start consciously creating our relationships, family, community, and our reality. We can get there, then we can start talking about, developing new technologies that helps humanity. And and I'm not saying that that doesn't exist out there, but I'm just saying we'll be able to get to the next level, right? There's always higher levels. So we want to exist in our higher nature. And that was not displayed in that film from what I saw. So that's my final breakdown of this film. Make sure that you all subscribe to my channel and let me know your thoughts. If you've seen the Polygamist Netflix series, let me know your takeaways, any thoughts that you had. You may have looked deeper into this than I did, in terms of the character, different dynamics. So put it in the comment section. Make sure you like this video, share, creating dialogue. And this is important. These conversations are important. It's a reason that this is trending right now, #2 in the US on Netflix. Poly is very trendy right now. This is going on in people's mind. The reason why is because we are on a divine time clock and it's time. The future is community. That's why this is on people's mind. All right. So my name is Asha Sekhmet and I am a polygamous, polyamorous expert. And this is what I do. This is my life purpose. So if you want to schedule a one-on-one with me as well, you can do that through my website. All right. And all the links are in my description. Follow me on social medias. I am Asha Sekhmet. And I will see you all in the next video. Me and hubby will be going live a little later too on his YouTube. So check that out. That's Supreme Will Be. Okay.